Hello grade 12s, welcome to today's lesson. Today we're doing economics with Ms. Piwe, and today we'll be looking at free trade. Remember, in our previous lesson we looked at the importance of international trade. We also established that countries are no longer self-sufficient and therefore they depend on other countries for certain goods and services. And also now that the fact that specialization has become something that's very important in the world of economics. So if you specialize in making a particular product, then you end up with a surplus. So it is advised that countries sell their surpluses to other countries in order to generate an income. And where there is a shortage, then they should engage in a conversation with other countries in order to be supplied with goods and services that they cannot provide for their citizens. So international trade is something that's very important, but it needs to be managed because government also needs to support the local suppliers, encourage citizens to buy from local suppliers and not just international goods and services. And also we looked at a couple of factors that might attribute to an increase in the international trade over the past couple of years. We have seen that there's been an increase in the income levels of different populations, and that has also played an important role in encouraging international trade. And also our tastes and preferences have also changed over the past few years, and they've become so advanced that it is impossible for a country to meet all the needs and wants of its citizens. Therefore, it needs to be in consultation and discussion with other countries in order to satisfy those needs and wants. So today we're looking at free trade, and the opposite of free trade will be protectionism, which we're going to look at in our next lesson. But I thought I want to bring it in this lesson so that when we go on to our next lesson, we just have an idea of what it is, because the two concepts do go hand in hand. So in order for us to understand free trade, we need to have a little bit of understanding of what protectionism is all about. So let's perhaps start there and look at what protectionism is all about. So this refers to government policies. So it is a policy and regulations such as restrictive quotas and tariffs on imported goods, which are designed to benefit local producers of goods and services in their competition with imported goods, thus helping them to survive. Remember, earlier on in the lesson, I did mention that government has the responsibility of promoting local suppliers, because if they do not support or promote local suppliers, then they're not going to grow and they're not going to survive in the world of economics. So it is important that government has a plan in place to support local suppliers so that they gain a competitive advantage over the competition of imported goods. So remember, when you import goods, you bring them from other countries into your own country. And then when you take goods from your country to other countries, we call that an export process. So government will put certain policies in place and regulations such as restrictive trade and tariffs on imported goods. You will see that if you travel and you go overseas and you buy certain items in bulk, you have to pay a tariff when you come back into the airport, our local airport, because they do charge tariffs on goods that are brought in from other countries, because government has all of this in order to assist local suppliers and also to help them to survive in this competitive environment that they find themselves in. So that is a definition of what protectionism is all about. In our next lesson, we're going to go in much detail to explore what protectionism is all about. But I thought it would really help just to bring it in before we start looking at free trade. So what is free trade? I know that you're sitting there and you're like, oh, I know this one. So let's just go over it so that we make sure that you've got a correct explanation or definition there at home or at school. So free trade occurs where government creates very few barriers to international trade. So in this particular instance, government does encourage international trade. So in doing so, they will create very few barriers to international trade. So this allows the free flow of goods and services into the country from any other country that can produce these goods cheaper, better, or in the required volumes. So these are important things that we need to discuss. So let's start with cheaper goods and products. So, if we are in a difficult economic climate, we need to control our spending. And we as consumers or households start looking at pricing before we purchase consumer goods. So we actually compare and we want to purchase the cheapest or the item that comes at the cheapest price. But obviously that will satisfy the needs and wants that you have. So in a difficult economic climate, pricing plays a very important role because you are definitely going to go for a cheaper price because you are trying to save, because your income or your disposable income has been compromised and you don't have that much in your pocket to spend, and therefore it's important that you shop around and you compare prices. And sometimes we want a better product. It might happen that the local suppliers are not producing the quality level that we are wanting as consumers or households. So therefore, we start looking at international brands who could possibly supply us with a better quality of that particular product or goods or services. So it's important that we look at the quality and the standard of products as well. In other instances, our own local suppliers may fail to provide the required volumes. So the quantity of goods that are required by the local citizens might overwhelm the local suppliers, and therefore we as government need to consider importing these goods into our country because our local suppliers aren't in a position to produce this in the bulk or the quantity that is wanted by our local citizens. So we then need to engage in conversations with other countries in order to receive these goods in the required volume. So price, quality, and quantity are very important. And in a free trade environment, the government will create a few barriers to international trade. So they do actually encourage more economic activity around international trade because of the price, quality, and quantity. Whereas when we look at protectionism, government has restrictive measures in place and they have policies and regulations that are monitored or designed to benefit local suppliers or producers of items. In other words, government wants to encourage citizens to purchase goods from local suppliers. So please be aware of these two concepts because they are very important. You will see in your book when you page through, it goes protectionism and free trade. So the two topics are interrelated, and please don't look at them in isolation. See how they are related. See what overlaps between these two topics so that you can have a better understanding of what protectionism and free trade is all about. And our next point is export promotion. So we said with free trade, government is encouraging international trade. So they have few barriers in the market. So in other words, they do encourage local suppliers to purchase certain goods and services from international suppliers based on price, quality, and quantity. So why would government promote the export? So with export, it's us sending goods to other countries. So these are products that are manufactured by local suppliers, and our government will promote them to other countries because we have them in a surplus, and therefore we are in a position where we can sell or trade with other countries so that we can acquire goods where we have a shortage or we are unable to produce based on a number of issues. We've looked at climatic issues in our previous lesson, that they also play a role in the manufacturing of certain products, and if, in other words, if the climate is conducive to those products being produced at a cheaper price, obviously they'll be made in large quantities in those countries. So what is export promotion? So export promotion involves providing incentives to encourage local businesses to produce goods for export. So here we're putting incentives in place to encourage local businesses to produce goods for export. So these goods are produced with an intention of being sold to other countries. That is really good when we look at the circular flow, because if we export to other countries, we're getting an injection into our circular flow model, which is good for economic growth. So businesses or government will put certain incentives in place in order to encourage local businesses to manufacture or to produce goods that could be exported to other countries. So this is actually a good thing also when looking at our GDP, because that could actually increase our GDP, because we are looking at goods and services that are produced within a specific country over a period of time. So if there is more production happening because there are incentives in place in terms or in order to encourage local suppliers to produce more so that we can export to other countries as well. So what are some of the reasons that we will have this export promotion? So we've looked at the definition of what it is over here, and we know this promotion involves providing incentives to encourage local businesses to produce goods for export. And now we are going to look at reasons for export promotion. So some of the reasons for export promotion are: the country achieves significant export-led economic growth. Okay, so in order for economic growth to happen, there needs to be an increase in the economic activity. So if businesses or firms are producing more, that creates employment opportunities for households. So households can actually be employed and earn an income, and therefore now that they have a disposable income, they can then spend. And then that spending becomes another person's income. So yet again, we see the multiplier effect coming into place. So we can actually have an export-led economic growth. So if our exports are really good, if we are really exporting goods and services in large quantities, that obviously will contribute towards our economic growth, and then we end up achieving a significant export-led economic growth, which is really encouraged. So by government putting incentives in place, they are actually encouraging local suppliers to produce more, so that we can have more economic activity, increase our GDP, and eventually end up with a positive economic growth. Export promotion enlarges the production capacity of the country. The fact that government has given incentives to local businesses, that will increase the production capacity. So there'll be more economic activity happening as a result of the incentives that are put in place by government to encourage local suppliers to produce more items in larger quantities. So it is a good thing for the country to increase its production capacity, because that will also contribute towards the GDP. And then if our GDP increases, that would have a positive impact on the economic growth. So it's important also to look at the relationship between production, labor, and spending as well. So because if production increases, it means that more people have employment opportunities, and then more people have disposable income and they can spend, and then that creates more economic activity in a country. The export markets are much bigger than local markets, so that's a given fact. Okay, so the fact that there is more being sold to other countries than what is being received or made in local markets. So there is a bigger gap between these two, between the export markets and the local markets, because the local markets are only based on the local suppliers that we have in South Africa. But if you look at the export market itself, it's more of an international market. It's not just limited to one particular country, not even to one particular continent. It's different countries and different continents that interact with one another because they are dealing with the issue of scarcity, the fact that we have limited resources and unlimited wants and needs. So government needs to be proactive in addressing these issues by ensuring that they do put measures in place to encourage more economic activity in their country. And an export could be a measure or an incentive used by government to grow its economy and ending up having an export-led economic growth. Also, more workers will be employed. I have been saying this, that if you increase your production capacity, that will require more labor from the households. So we see the households selling their factors of production. They are able to generate an income, and from that income, they are able to go and spend in the firms in order to buy consumer goods and services, and also, most importantly, in order to satisfy their needs. And then prices will be reduced, okay, because of the incentives that are put in place by government. So government might just decrease the tax that it charges firms and all that in order to allow them to put more money back into the system in order to increase economic activity. So government does at times have policies to encourage free trade and export promotion, because exports do play a significant role in making sure that we grow our economy. And the more we trade with other countries, you know, we have trade agreements in place, and then we have employment opportunities created for the local citizens. Well, that's been very interesting just to go through the reasons for export promotion. So just be aware of them when you are approaching your exam. For now, we're going to take a short break, and I will catch you right after this.